She wore everything I ever gave her, except the bracelet I carved my loyalty into. I noticed it missing the night we finalized the wedding guest list. Deborah had just returned from a weekend retreat with Lisa. Her smile was perfect, her skin smelled like new perfume, but her wrist, naked. "Where's the bracelet?" I asked, pretending it was casual. She glanced down at her hand like it hadn't crossed her mind in weeks. "Oh. It's in my drawer, baby. I didn't want to damage it on the trip." The drawer she mentioned hadn't been opened in days. I knew that because I had tucked her backup charger in there myself, but I nodded like I believed her. I always did. That was my first betrayal, to myself. It wasn't just jewelry, it was a symbol, my mother's stone, my father's engraving, a single line etched behind the clasp: "If she forgets, remember." Deborah had forgotten, or worse, she remembered and hid it. 2 days later, Lisa dropped by unannounced. She wore a red halter dress and that smirk that made every compliment feel like a dagger wrapped in satin. As she leaned over to pour wine, the bracelet shimmered on her wrist. My bracelet. I didn't say anything, I simply watched. Lisa met my gaze for a second too long, then, with deliberate fingers, she pulled her hair behind her ear. "Oops, thought this was mine. Deborah let me borrow it, hope that's okay." Deborah didn't flinch, she just laughed. "Oh, come on, James, you're not mad, are you?" "No," I said. "Why would I be?" But inside, something cold cracked open. I invited David to the wedding 2 weeks later. Old college friend, ex-boyfriend. The only man Deborah said was too immature to matter. But I'd seen the way her face twitched when his name popped up on someone's feed. I texted him one line: "You should come, I'm sure Deborah would love it." He replied, "Wouldn't miss it." The rehearsal dinner was a performance. Deborah sparkled eye in pearls. Lisa gave a speech about sisterhood. David raised a toast. Everything looked perfect until I gave Deborah a small velvet box and said, "A surprise before the big day." She opened it, expecting a necklace. Instead, the bracelet sat there, coiled like a silent question. Her face was drained of color. "I thought you lost it," I said, loud enough for the table to hear. Lisa laughed nervously. "Oh, that's awkward." Deborah whispered, "Can we talk?" I leaned in. "We're already talking." That night, she tried to spin stories like silk. I didn't mean to hide it. Lisa liked it. I didn't know how to say no. "You didn't say no when she wore it. You didn't say no when she posted it. You didn't say no when you saw it on her wrist and smiled like it never meant a damn thing." She cried. I let her. I didn't cancel the wedding. I didn't scream or throw things. I just watched. Quiet men aren't quiet because they're calm. They're quiet because they're calculating. The morning of the wedding, I arrived early. The venue was drowned in roses and violins. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was blind, except me. I handed the wedding planner a gift box, the same box, and said, "Give this to her when I leave." "Leave?" the planner asked. I adjusted my cufflinks. "Yes, after she says I do." Deborah walked down the aisle like she belonged to the moment. The crowd was breathless. She reached me, trembling with excitement. "You look beautiful," I said. She smiled, relieved. The priest began the vows. When it was my turn, I took a breath. I, James Carter, take you, Deborah Lou, as the woman who taught me what hiding love really looks like. Murmurs spread like wildfire. She blinked. "James?" I looked out at the guests. She took a bracelet I gave her and handed it to someone else. "Maybe that's small to you, but that bracelet carried everything I ever felt." Gasps. Lisa froze. David smirked. Deborah shook her head, muttering, "No, no, please don't." I turned to the crowd and said, "You deserve to know what kind of bride you're celebrating. She doesn't just misplace loyalty, she lends it out." I stepped back. "Enjoy the cake." And I walked down the aisle alone. When she opened the box later, in front of everyone, there was no bracelet inside anymore. Only a note that read, "What you hide, I return. What I gave, I no longer want back." I wasn't the kind of man who noticed when a candle was replaced or when curtains were restitched. But I remembered exactly how Deborah's hand looked the night I gave her that bracelet. Her fingers were still red from helping me carry groceries. She'd laughed when I dropped the bag of oranges, and when she opened the box, she paused, as if afraid it wasn't real. It wasn't expensive, but it meant everything. She had always called me the quiet one. The planner. The dependable man who always had the right umbrella when it rained and the right words when she cried. We met 6 years ago at a consulting conference in D.C. She was wearing a navy blue dress and mismatched earrings. Her colleague had abandoned her for an impromptu date, and she sat on the hotel steps with cold coffee and a dead phone. I lent her my charger. That was it. She never gave it back. 2 weeks later, she invited me to a gallery exhibit in New York. I pretended I liked the art. She pretended she wasn't testing me. By the 4th date, she stopped pretending. By the 6th, I knew I wanted to marry her. But Deborah didn't love loudly. Her affection came in gestures, not words. She packed me lunch every Monday. She circled typos in my proposals like a grammar cop with a crush. She once sewed a button onto my coat without telling me. I noticed 2 months later and felt strangely loved. She had a way of making people orbit her. That's how Lisa entered the picture. Lisa was Deborah's best friend from university, the kind of woman who turned heads just by walking into a room, but instead of soft charm, she wore her presence like a weapon. Red lipstick, flashy heels, sarcasm that came sharp and fast. The first time I met her, she told me my shoes were responsible but boring. I told her I liked my soles intact. She smirked. He's got claws, Deborah, keep him. Over time, I learned their friendship was part loyalty, part competition. Lisa flirted with danger. Deborah clung to the structure, but somehow, they complemented each other. I often wondered if Lisa wanted what Deborah had, or just wanted to prove she could take it if she wanted to. Still, Deborah never gave me reason to worry. Even when Lisa stayed over after late-night wine or joined us on trips, I trusted her. I had to. Loving Deborah without trust would have been like driving blindfolded. There were nights we fought, of course. She said I was too cold, too calculating. I said she left too many things unsaid, but we always circled back. Apologies, hugs, sleepless silences that ended with a whispered, "I'm sorry," at 2 a.m. That's how we were, not perfect, but stable enough to build a life. When I proposed, she said yes before I could finish the question. No tears, just that quiet, knowing smile. We took a photo. She captioned it, "Forever with my balance." I saved it in 3 places. That's when David resurfaced. David was her college ex. A finance guy turned startup owner. The kind of man who walked into parties like he was the host even when he wasn't invited. They had dated for a year. It ended badly. According to Deborah, he needed attention more than he needed oxygen. Still, when she told me he'd messaged her to congratulate her on our engagement, she laughed it off. Can you believe he had the nerve? He still thinks I'm waiting. I smiled. Are you? She rolled her eyes. Please, if I wanted a walking red flag, I'd date Lisa. But there was something in her tone I couldn't unhear. A slight amusement. Like being wanted by him still meant something. I didn't ask further. Trust, remember? 3 weeks later, we went ring shopping. She picked something elegant, platinum, single diamond, no glitter. Simple, like us, she said. The salesperson said we made a lovely couple. I agreed. That night, we celebrated at home. She wore my hoodie, drank half a glass of wine, and fell asleep on the sofa. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I'm proud of us." I meant it. We booked a spring wedding, garden venue, 150 guests. Lisa volunteered as maid of honor. I was hesitant, but Deborah insisted. She's my only real friend. I didn't argue. Deborah started spending more time at fittings and bridal expos. Lisa joined every step. She posted updates online, wedding count. Tea down, #bridezilla, #best friend duties. One post caught my eye. It was a mirror selfie of Lisa trying on a velvet dress, but in the corner of the frame, reflected clearly, was the bracelet, my bracelet, on Lisa's wrist. I said nothing that day. I stared at the photo until the screen dimmed. I told myself I'd ask Deborah later, but when later came, I didn't. Instead, I watched. I watched how she deflected when I brought up the bracelet. How she reached for excuses like a magician pulling scarves from her sleeve. Lisa wanted to borrow something. I asked, "Why didn't you ask me first?" She shrugged. "Because it's just a bracelet, James. Just a bracelet. Like it hadn't taken me 3 jobs and 4 months to afford. Like it didn't carry my mother's stone. Like it wasn't the first real thing I ever gave her." But what could I say? Would I really blow up our engagement over a lone trinket? No, instead, I began to catalog everything. The late replies, the overnight stays at Lisa's, the way she smiled too tightly when David's name came up at brunch with mutual friends, and slowly, I began to subtract her from my future. The man she had loved was already gone, the man she stood beside now was silent and watching. When we sent out invitations, I added one more name, David. She didn't notice, or maybe she did, and chose not to speak, just like I didn't mention Lisa's bracelet photo. I knew then what kind of woman I was marrying, not a villain, not cruel, just someone who could bury guilt beneath giggles and treat loyalty like glass, transparent until it shattered. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was waiting. Because when you give someone your whole heart, and they tuck it away like an accessory, the only thing left to give them is silence. And a gift box. The kind you leave behind, not as a symbol of love, but as a farewell to what never truly existed. It started with her laugh, not the soft one she gave when I teased her, or the throaty chuckle when she was wine-drunk and barefoot. This laugh was sharper, defensive, one that masked something else. I heard it from the hallway before I even opened the door. Inside, Lisa was sitting cross-legged on our couch, holding a glass of orange juice like it was champagne. Deborah was beside her, barefoot, in an oversized shirt that wasn't mine. They were mid-conversation, and as soon as I walked in, the atmosphere stiffened like cold glass. Lisa's smile barely faltered. "James," she said, in a tone too cheerful, "we were just talking about you." Deborah didn't look at me, she was focused on pouring more juice. I hung my coat, set my laptop bag down, and kept my voice level. "Hope it was a good story." "Oh, it was juicy," Lisa grinned, her eyes watching me too closely. Deborah finally looked up. "She's exaggerating. She said you're too serious for your own good." "I usually am," I said, walking past them. "Especially when things stop making sense." Lisa's eyes narrowed slightly. She knew I wasn't talking about her joke. She leaned back, eyed into the couch, and crossed her legs with the elegance of someone who knew she was untouchable, for now. Later that night, Deborah curled up next to me in bed and whispered, "Don't be weird, okay? Lisa just likes to stir things up." I stared at the ceiling. "That bracelet, is it still in your drawer?" Her body tensed, a second too long before she answered. "No, I think I might have left it in Lisa's purse. You know how we keep swapping things." I turned my head slowly. "That's not something you swap. That was mine. It was always meant for you." She hesitated, then said quietly, "Do you want me to ask for it back?" "No," I said. "I want to know why you gave it away." Silence. She pressed her forehead to my shoulder. "I didn't mean anything by it." And somehow, that made it worse. The days that followed were subtle but tense. She talked more, I listened less, she tried harder, I stopped asking questions. One morning, I opened her email to double-check the vendor confirmation for the cake. What I saw wasn't cake-related. Inbox, David Liu. Subject, "Hey, you still think about it?" My pulse slowed, I clicked. The thread had dozens of replies, flirty, nostalgic, playful in a way we hadn't been in months. "Remember that night at the lake house? God, your voice when you're angry was the hottest thing. Your fiancé doesn't see this side of you, huh?" Her reply, "He doesn't need to. I've grown up, that girl doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, sometimes I do think about it." I stared at the screen for a long time. She had said once that David was the kind of mistake you don't repeat. She never said anything about missing him. When she came out of the shower, wrapped in a white towel and smelling like lilac, I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I simply asked, "Have you been talking to David lately?" She froze near the closet. A few droplets rolled down her shoulder. She played with her earring like she always did when nervous. "Yeah, just once or twice. He congratulated us." "That's it?" I asked. "James," she said softly, "don't make this a thing, please." I nodded, slowly. "Okay." And I walked out. That night, I sent Lisa a message. "Is the bracelet still with you?" She replied in 2 minutes. "Nope, give it back. You should ask Deborah where it went after that." I didn't reply. The next day, I called David. He picked up like he'd been expecting me. "So, this is awkward. Let's skip awkward. Tell me what's going on." He laughed. Man, you really think I'd waste my time chasing someone who ghosted me for 4 years? You emailed her 16 times in 2 months. Because I wanted closure, he replied. Look, I messed up with her. You were the safe bet. I was the fire. She likes fire, James. That's not on me. I didn't speak. Then he added, but she's not coming back to me. She already got what she needed. I hung up. Later that evening, I found the bracelet, not in her drawer, not in Lisa's bag, but in the glove compartment of her car. It was shoved between receipts and a tube of lip balm. The stone was scratched. The chain was bent. As I stood there, holding it in my palm, Deborah walked up behind me. She looked at the bracelet like it was foreign, then said, I was going to get it cleaned. You never told me it wet. Sis lost, I said. I didn't want to upset you. I closed my fingers around the silver and looked her in the eye. You weren't afraid of hurting me. You were afraid of being caught. Her voice trembled. James, that's not true. I never meant for any of this to happen. You just what? I asked, voice calm. Wanted to see if you could still get his attention? Wanted Lisa to envy what you have? Her silence was the answer. I didn't sleep that night. I watched her while she pretended to be at peace. The kind of peace you only feel when you think the person beside you is still blind. But I am awake now. She hid the bracelet. She flirted with a man who had hurt her before. She shared jokes and glances with a friend who wanted nothing more than to be in her place. And I had said nothing, all this time. That silence had turned me into an accomplice to my own humiliation. A week before the wedding, Deborah's aunt threw her a bridal tea. Lisa posted photos. Everyone looked happy. But one picture stood out. David was there, standing beside Deborah, his hand on her back. Her smile is not forced. I stared at it for hours. I didn't ask why he came. I didn't accuse her. Instead, I called the venue. Hi, I need to add one small instruction regarding the gift table. That evening, Deborah found the bracelet back on her nightstand, polished, cleaned, repaired. She picked it up slowly, looked at me with cautious relief. You fixed it? I nodded. Some things are worth preserving. Her eyes welled up. I'm sorry for how I handled it. I kissed her forehead. Don't worry, everything's going exactly how it should. James had always believed that clarity was strength. In finance, in friendships, in love, clarity was everything. But now, clarity felt like a punishment. Every detail was too sharp, every silence too loud. He couldn't sleep. The bracelet sat neatly on Deborah's dresser, gleaming under the lamplight. It should have looked right. Instead, it looked like evidence, something polished after being hidden. He lay on the far side of the bed, pretending to scroll through emails while Deborah softly breathed beside him. She hadn't touched the bracelet since he returned it. It sat there, untouched, like a truth she refused to acknowledge. It wasn't the bracelet itself that haunted him, it was what it represented. That for the first time in their 6-year relationship, he had stopped being her first instinct. Deborah used to reach for his hand during stressful meetings, used to lean into him at parties, used to whisper things only he was meant to hear. Now, she whispered to Lisa. Or David. Or worse, she whispered nothing at all. And James? He was a shadow in the home he built for her. He got up before sunrise, walked past her sleeping form. Coffee helped, but not enough to wash down the unease. He opened his inbox and forced himself to respond to a few client reports. Then he pulled up the wedding registry. He didn't recognize half the names, people Deborah had insisted they include. Lisa says we need a bigger circle. It looks better, she'd said with a grin. At the time, he'd shrugged it off. But now, that grin replayed in his head over and over, like a mask. He tried to focus on tasks, pick up the tailored suit, confirm seating charts, finalize honeymoon bookings, but his mind kept spiraling. What if David showed up and looked at her the way James used to? What if she looked back? At lunch, he met Charles, his best man, for coffee. Charles had always been blunt, but today he looked cautious, like handling glass. You look pale, man, you okay? James stirred his coffee, then set the spoon down. If your fiancée returned a gift without telling you, would you be upset? Charles blinked. She go, it back to the store? No, gave it to a friend. Charles let out a low whistle. What kind of gift? James hesitated. One of a kind. Oh, Charles leaned forward. And she didn't say a word? James shook his head. Charles frowned. Look, I'm not saying call off the wedding, but if something feels off, it probably is. James didn't reply. He was tired of everyone being right. That evening, he returned to find Deborah pacing the living room. Her phone was in her hand, her lips pressed tight. When she saw him, she forced a smile. Hey, Lisa canceled on dress shopping. Something came up. Can you come instead? He nodded. Of course. The bridal boutique was quiet. Deborah tried on gowns while James sat silently, staring at his phone. When she emerged in a pearl white dress, he looked up. She was stunning, but all he could see was the absence of the woman who used to blush when he stared too long, the woman who used to fix his collar before big meetings, the woman who used to grab his hand under the table, just to let him know she was there. She looked at herself in the mirror. You don't like it? I do, he said softly. You look beautiful. But her reflection didn't smile. Later that night, he stood on the balcony, staring at the city lights. Deborah joined him, wrapping her arms around his waist. You've been distant, she said, pressing her cheek to his back. I've been thinking. About what? He didn't answer right away. The wind brushed past them like a ghost. About who we were. And who we are now. She tensed. I don't blame you for changing, he continued. People evolve, but I didn't expect to feel like a stranger this close to the altar. Deborah turned him to face her. Her eyes were glassy. I'm sorry if I made you feel that way. He looked down at her. Do you miss him? The pause that followed was long, too long. No, she said at last, but I miss how I felt around him sometimes. James blinked. And how's that different from how you feel with me? She exhaled shakily. With you, I feel safe, whole, supported. And with him? She hesitated. Alive. That word shattered something inside him, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. He stepped back. Do I make you feel dead? No, she said quickly. James, you're everything I ever needed, but I... He waited. The words never came. He went to bed that night knowing nothing would ever feel the same again. His dreams were vivid. In one, he stood at the altar, and Deborah wore no bracelet, no ring, just a white dress and a smile meant for someone else. In another, she turned away as he reached for her hand, disappearing into a fog where only Lisa's laughter echoed. He woke up breathless. The bed was empty. He found Deborah in the kitchen, staring into the fridge like she'd forgotten what hunger meant. Can't sleep? He asked. She didn't turn. No, I keep thinking about everything. James leaned against the counter. Me too. She looked over her shoulder. Are we still getting married? The question hit him harder than he expected. Yes, he said finally. But I need you to want it for the right reasons. She looked at him, eyes rimmed red. I do, James. I lost sight of what matters. He didn't respond. She crossed the floor, took his hand, and placed something inside it. The bracelet. I want to wear it on the wedding day, she whispered. I shouldn't have ever taken it off. James stared at it. It feels heavier now. I believe you, he said, but I don't know if that's enough anymore. The next few days were quiet, not peaceful, just silent, like both of them were trying not to make any more cracks in the foundation. Lisa didn't visit. David didn't call, but their shadows remained in the room like guests and no one could ask to leave. James avoided looking at the calendar. Each X that marked a passing day felt more like a countdown than a celebration. When he saw Deborah laugh again, for real, at a dumb sitcom, they shared a moment. She leaned her head on his shoulder. For a second, things almost felt right. But then the weight returned, the weight of a question that had never been answered. Why did she hide the bracelet? Not why she gave it away, not why Lisa wore it. Why did she hide it? Why didn't she come forward? Why she looked him in the eye every day and choose silence? He didn't ask again. He didn't want her rehearsed answers. What he needed was clarity, and it wasn't going to come from her. So, James began to write. A note, not long, not bitter, just the truth. He tucked it into the same velvet box the bracelet came in, sealed it, and placed it among the wedding gifts, not the ones wrapped in gold foil or marked with bows, just a plain box, no tag, just like her apology. James wasn't supposed to be home early that Thursday. The meeting with a client in Midtown had ended ahead of schedule, traffic was merciful, and maybe, deep down, a part of him wanted to see if Deborah's days alone matched her words. He turned the key quietly. The apartment was dim, the curtains half drawn. He heard voices, low, hurried, too familiar. He froze by the door. "I told you not to bring that up again." Deborah. Her voice was sharp, unlike anything she ever used with him. Another voice, female, cocky. "Oh come on Deb, you know I'm not the one playing house here. I just said what he already suspects." James stepped further in, the carpet muffling his steps. Lisa was leaning against the kitchen island, twirling a fork in her hand. Deborah stood near the fridge, arms crossed, visibly tense. "You told him about the bracelet," Deborah hissed. Lisa shrugged. "I didn't say anything directly, I just made sure he noticed." "Why would you do that?" Lisa smirked. "Because it's fun watching a man pretend not to see what's right in front of him. You're not the only one playing both sides." James's hand tightened on the doorknob, his pulse thundered in his ears. Deborah looked exhausted. "He still wants to marry me, Lisa, despite everything. I'm trying to fix this." "And what if he finds out the rest?" Lisa's voice turned cold. "That you didn't just hide the bracelet. You lied about David too?" James stepped into view. Both women froze. The silence was brutal. Lisa straightened up but didn't flinch. Deborah looked like she'd seen a ghost. "I was just leaving," Lisa said, tossing the fork onto the counter. "No," James said, calm but clipped. "Stay. I want to hear the rest." Lisa glanced at Deborah, then back at James. "You sure?" "Yes." Deborah opened her mouth, then closed it. Her fingers dug into her elbows. "James, I was going to tell you." "When?" "I don't know. After the wedding, maybe before. I thought it was over." He turned to Lisa. "Say it." Lisa's lips curled. She didn't just message David, she met him, twice, once for lunch, once at a hotel. Deborah burst. "That's not true." Lisa ignored her. "You want to know what bracelet she wore when she met him?" "Stop it," Deborah shouted. "You don't know what happened." "I know enough," Lisa said. "You wanted a backup plan, you kept me close because I see through you, and you kept him in your inbox in case your life with James got too boring." James turned to Deborah. "Is it true?" She was shaking now. "I didn't sleep with him, I swear. I met him once. The lunch wasn't planned. We ran into each other at the exhibit, the hotel." She stopped. "The hotel?" James's voice dropped. Her eyes flooded. "It wasn't what it looked like. We just talked. I was confused. I felt like I was losing myself. You were always so perfect. I didn't know how to tell you I felt distant, so I clung to something familiar." James's jaw clenched. "You could have clung to me." "I didn't know how," she whispered. Lisa laughed. "There it is, drama served cold." James turned to Lisa. "Why are you even here?" Lisa walked toward the door slowly. "Because I wanted to see the moment the cracks finally split open. She was never going to tell you, and you were too in love to see what she really is." And then she left. James sat down at the dining table. Deborah stood across from him, trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You have to believe me, it meant nothing." He reached out during a weak moment and I responded. "That's it." He stared at her. "You met him twice. I wore my bracelet to meet him, lied to me, hid it. You brought a man I trusted enough to invite into our future back into your arms, and then expected me not to see it." Her tears came in quiet waves. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did." "James, please, this is all unraveling. I know, but I still want to marry you. I still love you." He stood. I walked past her to the bedroom, opened the drawer, took out the letter. "I already left you my answer." He placed the box in her hands, the velvet one, the same one she'd ignored. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was the bracelet, again, and the note. She unfolded it slowly. "What you buried, I recovered. What you gave away, I returned. I was never hiding. You were." She looked up, panicked. "This can't be how it ends." He stared at her, expression unreadable. "It's not ending. It ended a while ago. You just didn't notice." Over the next few days, James moved into a hotel. The wedding planner called. Vendors canceled. Deposits were burned. Deborah's parents were furious. Her mother called James, begging him to reconsider. You two have history, don't throw it away. James responded, I'm not throwing anything, I'm letting go of what was already gone. He didn't answer any more calls after that. A week later, Deborah showed up outside his hotel, no makeup, no jewelry, just the box clutched in her hands. I don't care if you hate me, she said. I just needed to tell you something. He didn't stop her. She stepped closer. I never loved David. I loved the part of myself I used to be when I was with him, reckless, carefree. That died the moment I met you, but I kept chasing it like it would make me feel whole. He didn't reply. She added, you made me feel safe, but I didn't know how to be safe with someone without ruining it. I sabotaged what we had because I didn't believe I deserved it. Still, he said nothing. Deborah looked down at the box. I'm not giving this back, not because I think I deserve it, but because I want to remember what I broke. She turned to leave. And for the first time, James felt something new. Not rage, not grief, relief. The twist wasn't that she'd lied, it was that she had never truly believed he'd leave. Until now. James hadn't planned to attend the ceremony, not even as a spectator, not even from the back row. But when he received the invitation in an envelope bearing Deborah's name, handwritten, not printed, he knew what it was. It wasn't the original wedding, it was a new one, a last-minute pivot, a desperate act, a public apology wearing a veil. She was marrying David, not in spring, not in white, not with James, but she was marrying him. The location was different too. Gone was the garden venue they'd chosen together. Instead, it was held in a downtown rooftop hall, glass walls, gold runners, panoramic skyline, glamour over memory, performance over meaning. James arrived 30 minutes early, not for drama, just to see, to look the truth in the eye and confirm what his gut had been whispering ever since Lisa dropped the bomb. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, hair combed back, calm. People looked at him like a myth, some whispered, some stared too long. One woman tapped her husband's shoulder and said something about the ex who walked out, let them talk. He stood near the back, silent, watching. Then she entered. Deborah, no veil, red lips, a silky cream gown with a slit running too high for modesty, diamonds at her neck, but no bracelet on her wrist. Not the one he gave her, not the one she hid, not the one he returned twice. Just emptiness. She looked radiant and hollow. David stood near the altar, grinning like he'd already won. And maybe, to the world, he had. James turned to leave. That should have been it. But then, from the corner of his eye, he saw her freeze. Deborah had spotted him. Her expression faltered. David noticed too. He followed her gaze, his smirk twitched. The music faded, the priest cleared his throat. Shall we begin? Deborah didn't move. Everyone waited. Then James did something no one expected. He walked forward, slowly, calmly, deliberately. Not to stop the wedding, not to speak now or forever hold his peace, just to finish what should have ended months ago. He reached the front row, faces turned, murmurs erupted. Deborah blinked. James, why are you here? I wanted to see what betrayal looks like in a tux, he said quietly. David chuckled. Bold of you to show up. James ignored him, his eyes never left Deborah. You really did it, you're actually going through with it. She swat. Load hard. James. This isn't what you think. No? He asked. You're not marrying the man you told me meant nothing. The man you swore was just a mistake. The man you met at a hotel and then said it was just talking? Her eyes shimmered. I thought it would help me move on. I thought if I could restart, if I could just rewrite the ending. He shook his head. You don't rewrite endings by erasing the beginning. You just bury it, until it rots. David stepped in. All right, you've had your little monologue, why don't you go crawl back to whatever regret hole you came from? James turned to him slowly. Regret? No. That left the day she gave you the parts of herself I earned. A gasp rippled through the room. The priest stepped back. Perhaps we should pause. No, James said. Let her decide. He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small velvet box, familiar, worn, the same one, again. He handed it to her. Open it. Deborah didn't move. Go on, he said. One last time. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was nothing. Not the bracelet, not the note, just space. Empty, like the promises she broke, like the vows she didn't mean, like the heart she'd returned in pieces. She stared at it, mouth open. James leaned in and whispered, "That's what you're marrying with." Then he turned. I walked back down the aisle. This time, no one moved to stop him. Outside, the air was sharp. The city hummed like nothing had happened. James stood still, absorbing it. But behind him, footsteps echoed. "James, wait." "Deborah." He didn't turn. "Please," she said breathlessly. "I didn't invite you to hurt you. I needed to see you, just once, before I said yes." He faced her now. "Then say it. Say yes. Finish what you started." Tears welled in her eyes. "It's not that simple." "It is," he said. "You already chose. When you hid the bracelet. When you met him. When you lied." "I made a mistake." "No," James said. "You made a pattern." She looked crushed. "I never needed you to be perfect, Deborah," he continued. "I just needed you to be honest, but you couldn't even do that when all I gave you was my trust." She whispered, "Do you still love me?" James paused, then, "I love the woman I thought you were, and I mourn her every day." Deborah gasped softly. He added, "But I won't marry a ghost." David appeared in the doorway, irritated. "You done?" James nodded. "I was done a long time ago." David smirked. "You know, for someone so logical, you're awfully dramatic." James gave a slight smile. "That's funny. For someone who wins, you sure look worried." David's grin flickered. Deborah stood between them, torn, shattered, but no longer innocent. "I never meant for this," she whispered. James nodded. "No one ever does, until it's too late." Then he walked away. For the final time. That night, James sat by the river, P&B's. Hone off, suit jacket tossed aside, sleeves rolled up, he stared at the city lights and let them blur. He thought about the girl he met on those hotel stairs, the way she blushed at bad jokes, the way she danced barefoot when no one was looking, but that girl was gone, and he wasn't going to keep chasing someone who disappeared the moment commitment required clarity. He pulled out the bracelet one last time, the actual one. He'd removed it from the box hours before the wedding. He held it over the water. Then paused. Not everything broken needs to be destroyed. Sometimes, it just needs to be left behind. He placed the bracelet on the bench beside him. Not tossed, not discarded, just released. And then, James walked home, alone. But freer than he'd felt in years. 6 months had passed since the rooftop scene. The whispers had quieted, the hashtags had stopped trending, but James hadn't forgotten. Not the silence, not the humiliation, not the way Deborah's voice cracked when she realized he'd truly walked away. He had been patient, respectful, quiet, but closure wasn't always silence. Sometimes it needed a door slammed so loud, the echo reached every person who had watched him fall. James had returned to work full-time. His firm had just acquired a new digital agency, Cerise Creative. What no one outside the boardroom knew was that Cerise happened to hold the entire marketing portfolio for David's startup, which had grown after Deborah invested in it post-wedding. The irony was surgical. James now indirectly owned the branding pipeline for the very man who once called him forgettable. He didn't brag, he didn't posture, he waited for the board meeting. The CEO introduced him. "James Carter will be leading strategy on our integration of Cerise's legacy clients. He has full discretionary control, including which partnerships to continue and which to terminate." James smiled politely. "Thank you, I look forward to cleaning the house." That night, he made a call. One of the Cerise reps answered. "Can I help you?" "Yes," James said calmly. "Effective immediately, we'll be dropping Brand Lux Ventures from all creative operations. Send termination notices, no extensions, no final courtesy call." There was a pause. "But that's one of our, not anymore." He hung up. Word spread fast. David's company lost its digital presence in 3 hours. Campaigns pulled, social feeds deactivated, site banners removed. Just a placeholder message. "This account has been suspended by administrator request." David called 3 times, Left 2 voicemails, then resorted to texting. "We had a deal, Carter. Don't take your heartbreak out on me. You're not the only one with receipts." James didn't reply. He sent Lisa a simple message. "Ready to collect?" Lisa had always been waiting for a chance to switch sides. It wasn't loyalty that kept her with Deborah, it was convenient. And the moment that convenience turned into debt, emotional, financial, professional, Lisa backed off. She met James at a cafe 2 blocks from the courthouse. "I thought you'd never ask," she said, sipping an iced chai. James slid a folder across the table. "Photos, screenshots, voice memos, everything you need to destroy them both, publicly." Lisa raised a brow. "What's the price?" "Simple. When you burn the bridge, make sure I'm not on it." She smiled. "I'll build you a new one, with fireworks." 2 weeks later, Lisa posted a video on her lifestyle channel titled, "My ex-best friend's wedding was a lie, the story you never heard." She spoke slowly, clearly, never once sounding vindictive, only disappointed. "I stood beside Deborah on her wedding day. What you didn't know was that she had already emotionally cheated on her fiancé. What you didn't see was the bracelet she wore, the one she gave me, then took back, then lied about again and again." She played a short audio clip. Deborah laughing about James behind his back. Another clip. David mocking James's quiet nature. Then a final one. Deborah's voice, broken, whispering. "He'll never leave. He loves me too much." Lisa looked into the camera. Wrong. The video hit 1 million views in 24 hours. James didn't gloat, he didn't post, he didn't even celebrate, he just went to work, quietly, efficiently, with precision. One morning, he received an envelope, no return address. Inside, a wedding photo of Deborah and David, torn in half, a note scrawled beneath, "I should have worn the bracelet," no signature. He burned it. Deborah's downfall came slowly, like dusk swallowing sunlight. David's startup lost 40% valuation in a quarter, their new investors pulled out. Word got out about reputational risk and disruptive leaks. Deborah was cut from her father's real estate firm after board members voted her out. Her own father issued a public statement calling her a distraction. Tabloids feasted. Heiress to headache, Liu family's black sheep. Deborah's digital disaster, how one video ruined everything. The bracelet that broke the bride. James didn't speak to reporters, but they tried. Lisa visited him again. "You got everything you wanted." James didn't smile. "I got what I deserved. That's different." Lisa leaned in. "You know what's funny? In the end, she kept it." He looked up. "Kept what?" "The bracelet," she said. "She wears it now, not out in public, just when she's alone. I saw her once, no makeup, messy hair, and that bracelet, like it's the only thing she has left." James nodded. "It is." A year later, he visited Italy. A client expansion, but also a restart. New skyline, new silence, peace without performance. One afternoon, he walked by a river market. A girl was selling trinkets, wire-wrapped stones, bracelets with words etched in bronze. He picked one up. It read, "Let it hurt, then let it go." He bought it. Not as a replacement, but as a reminder that even scars could be worn without shame. James never saw Deborah again. But one evening, he got an anonymous email. Subject, "You were right. No text, just a photo." Deborah, in her old apartment, no makeup, holding the bracelet, crying. He stared at it, then hit delete. Some chapters don't end with closure, they end with a click.